Our mission at SD Bullion is clear: the lowest cost gold and silver available online. While we do not have pretty blue boxes, free shipping on every order, or glamorous gold and silver infomercials, SD Bullion has the lowest prices that may save you hundreds on your next order. So before you make your next investment, do the math and join the over 40,000 new customers who have recently made the switch to SD Bullion. Why pay more?
Hey everyone, I just created a new website, financeandliberty.com. On the website, you can subscribe to our newsletter, so you can keep up to date with all our original interviews and some of the best financial videos and articles from the web. And as usual, it's totally free of charge. So what are you waiting for? Click here and sign up today. Hey everyone, this is Elijah Johnson with financeandliberty.com, and with us today, a new guest, Mike from Rethinking the Dollar. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, Elijah, I appreciate you having me as a guest on your show. Looking forward to speaking with you.
All right. Well, I'd first like to discuss your website, Rethinking the Dollar. Can you explain a little bit about the meaning behind its title?
All right, not a problem, Bill. So just to give you an idea, just a little bit of my background. Back in my former years, I played professional sports. So I traveled the world a lot. And in doing so, I became somewhat of a currency collector. And so I lived down in Argentina and Chile and Uruguay and several countries where I had a chance to actually see firsthand what life was like in those countries. And so I ended up, collecting the currencies just as a little keepsake to bring back home here to America, just something to show my children when they got older. And in doing so, I made a lot of friends, and throughout the years kept in contact with those friends and, hearing about their struggles and really finding out that their currencies is not really what they were when I was using them myself. And so a lot of people have been kind of rethinking their own currencies locally. So it kind of got me into reading up on the dollar and the Federal Reserve note. And from there, started a whole, educational journey where now I'm just trying to tell people that there's more to a dollar than what we were taught in school or what we were not taught in school. So just from my traveling years, I got a chance to see currencies firsthand and then realize that our currency is in a similar position as theirs because it's a fiat-based currency that is backed by nothing and bound to return to its intrinsic value of zero one of these days. So that's kind of how the Rethinking Dollar message started. So
definitely, and I'd like to get more into that. But first, I'd like to discuss why you think it's so important that people are educated about the monetary system.
Well, I believe the monetary system and understanding just, a smidget of it will open your eyes to a different reality. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but it was years ago, a movie called The Matrix. And so I was actually in college during that time frame. And when the movie came out, it was a movie that kind of opened my eyes to the fact that, we're presented with a fake reality as far as just the day-to-day life we have here in America. And so that movie kind of opened my eyes up to the fact that there's more to every piece of, information that we've learned in school. And then I got to asking myself, I went pretty much from preschool all the way to a college degree studying business, and I learned absolutely nothing about money, like actual money, its history, other than just the typical things they share with us in the textbook, which is coming to find out now is more watered down than anything else. But yet, I learned that our monetary system and how money functions in our economy is similar to blood to the body. If the body has bad blood, then the whole body itself is sick. And so right now our monetary system, in my opinion, is not too healthy, being that, people are working, their tails off to save, invest, and to, live their lives based upon the idea that, they have a secure future in a piece of paper or a digit, but yet know very little about the history of our monetary system, how we went from coinage to just mere paper and digits. So the monetary system is by far one of the most important things we can learn, because right now things are shifting in our world. And so right now is a great time to really brush up on just some of the basics. Because once you begin asking yourself questions about how we've arrived to this point of an unpayable debt and just an entitlement mentality here, you'll start to wonder and guess, how long can this last? So that's kind of my thoughts on the monetary system.
Definitely. And one of the things that's really crucial to understand is the difference between what we have now as money in the United States, the Federal Reserve note, and the constitutional dollar, which we originally had, which, actually had value, and the Federal Reserve note is just paper right now. Can you explain the difference between these two currencies and how we basically went off the gold and silver standard?
Right, not a problem. So first of all, before I actually explain that, I want to just, on my website at rethinkingthedollar.com, I have what I consider like a monetary / IQ test. And so I kind of formulated 10, simple questions, asking, whoever comes to the site, just to test yourself, see where you're at. And, from there, you'll have a chance to see, what your current level of thinking is when it comes to money. And so looking over the results over the last several hundred people who have taken the test, the overall average from, hundreds of people who have taken our test is 20 to 30%. That means an overwhelming majority of our population who, stumble across the test or just happen to take it for fun are failing when it comes to understanding money. And that was just all in regards to the Federal Reserve, not to mention anything prior to the Federal Reserve or central banking in general. And so just get back to that question about the Federal Reserve note and the difference between that and the constitutional dollar. The Federal Reserve note, as your audience is aware, I'm sure, is that, I would like to say a product of a system that was designed to fail from its very origins, being that the whole idea of a central bank monopolizing a nation's money supply for its own profit and then returning it back to its citizens is, in my opinion, one of the closest things to flat out theft that there could be. And the fact that, we've lived upon that, piece of paper now for 100 plus years, and you can actually look at the purchasing power chart of the dollar from the Federal Reserve itself, and it just shows a dwindling spiral of lack of purchasing power, but nobody really seems to, for the most part, care or, really question, how low can that, chart go before, all hell breaks loose, pardon my French. And so the difference between a Federal Reserve note and a constitutional dollar is simple, that a constitutional dollar in its original sense was founded in our coinage act in 1792. The founding fathers of this country, they kind of came up with the idea that the best way to have something stable and consistent was to, coin money and not print money. And so it was clearly stated in the Constitution that, Congress has the right to coin money and to stabilize the value thereof in the measures of weights. And it was never intended to be an actual piece of paper because they had prior experience with the idea of paper and what it could do. And that was the continental currency, during the Revolutionary War. And so the understanding the difference between a Federal Reserve note and a dollar is quite simple. A dollar itself, according to, the rethinking the dollar method, it's a defined weight of silver. And a Federal Reserve note is a legalized obligation of our government that's owed back to a quasi, semi-private organization. So that's kind of the difference between the two. And one thing I might want to add, it might kind of, stir up a little bit of conversation, is the idea that, rethinking a dollar has a lot to do with what I would consider a dollar paradigm shift. Nations around the world already know that the dollar, quote unquote, the dollar has already expired. And that's why you can kind of tell that from all the activities happening out east with China, Russia, and just the whole rush towards, some form of hedge against, our currency or our world reserve currency at this point. So the dollar itself, in terms of Federal Reserve note, has already expired. And this is my statement I want to kind of make. The dollar at the end of the day is going to be fine. Like a lot of people say, monetary collapse. I've had a chance of on my show interviewing a lot of people, and we use the word dollar in the sense of it being a Federal Reserve note. And I believe the idea of rethinking the dollar is distinguishing between a Federal Reserve note and a constitutional dollar. And so when I say rethinking the dollar, it's kind of shifting your mind away from the idea of a paper and a digit and focusing more so on an actual measurement of weight. And so if you were to do that, then the measurement of weight aspect of silver, of course, gold as well, but silver is going to be fine long term. It's not going nowhere. It's been here for, 5,000 plus years. But yet the Federal Reserve note, that's something that I would question because it's only been around for 104 years and counting. But yet, as you see, the purchasing power is dwindling. So it's not much longer before, that thing comes into question amongst, me and you and as well as the citizens here locally. So the dollar is going to be fine long term, but the Federal Reserve note, I have big questions for.
If you could talk a little bit more about how the dollar's value has dwindled throughout the years ever since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913. I think the dollar has lost, anywhere from 95 to 98% of its value. And you're saying, it's not only losing its value, but it's also being rejected all around the world. Can you expand on this?
Right, not a problem. And so I believe, I kind of came to the whole, as I consider it, the monetary awareness, kind of right after the whole Great Recession type of thing, because during those years, I was, amongst the, as some people say, the sheeple myself, just concerned with my day-to-day life, married, children, things like that. Wasn't really concerned about, events happening around me. But yet that was my awakening moment where I began to ask questions about, what's going on with our monetary system. How come I'm hearing on the TV that we were minutes away from everything shutting down and collapsing and things like that? So that kind of got me started in reading and doing more research on my own. And in doing so, it really got me to asking, what is a dollar? I mean, I actually never asked myself what was a dollar or knew anything about what a dollar was by definition. And so in doing that, it really got me to looking into it and then just, typing in, dollar in Google or something like that. There's all types of news articles that come up throughout the years. But yet I want to go back to that graph of as the Federal Reserve says, the consumer dollar purchasing power graph, which you hinted at. And to actually see that graph and to see that over the last 100+ years, every type of event we've had, whether it be some type of recession or a war or something of that nature, has led to a spike in our national debt, which has then led to a debasement of our currency because they've, not they, but our government has allowed the central bank to, issue more credit / paper on our behalf. And in doing so, it's pretty much just, devalue what we currently save and hold. And so every event, I'm looking at a chart right now, every event from Federal Reserve, FDR, executive order to Bretton Woods to World War I, World War II, you name it. Every event we've had has just taken a hit at the dollar declining more and more and more. And so being that we're now down to 2-3%, that my question is, what will be the next catalyst that can take it, probably negative? I mean, not too many people actually talk about the idea that once the dollar, according to this chart, as far as purchasing power reaches zero or perhaps goes negative, that's inflationary. That's hyperinflation type status, similar to the things that's happening right now down in Venezuela. And so just to see that, over the last 100 years, the chart shows that we're losing purchasing power. It hasn't really stirred up any emotion in the public just yet because most people, are concerned with their day-to-day lives, not really, thinking long term, realizing that what they're saving and holding on to and trust in has already, for the most part, failed them. And so the Federal Reserve and the note itself and our debt is going to be the reason why, things shift drastically. And there will be a major dollar paradigm shift coming real soon, I believe.
So what did the creation of the Fed have to do with the expansion we now see in the national debt? How did the Fed enable the national debt to expand? Now it's at, nearly $20 trillion. All
right. Good point. Good question there. Now, I believe, in my opinion, the whole idea of a central bank, it was designed to take the shift and the blame and the responsibility off our government as far as being, fiscally responsible with, our budget and things like that. If we weren't, responsible for, issuing our own currency directly, we could actually, kind of rely upon someone else and appear to have to ask for permission to do certain things as far as, us, selling bonds and things like that to borrow money from other nations as well as our central banks. And so the Federal Reserve itself has proven to be somewhat of a crutch / aid to the, fiscal irresponsibility of our government over the last 100 years, as far as it being able to just, create digits into existence and borrow money and monetize debt and things like that. So the Federal Reserve itself has proven to be, I guess, what it was originally designed to do, which was to, privately monetize our national money and then to issue it back to us in the form of debt so that we can then return it back to them through taxation and things like that. Along the way, just debasing our currency through the concept of inflation, which baffles me at the fact that, it's considered a mandate that the Federal Reserve, brags about, that it's their responsibility to make sure that they stay at a 2.0% or 2%, rate of inflation, which is basically saying that 2% every year is going to be less purchasing power in our pockets. And so the idea that, is considered, monetary policy is absolutely ludicrous to me. But yet that's just how insane this world is now. And the fact that central banking has pretty much taken over the world and pretty much, enslaved, all of us to their policies and to their way of thinking. And, it's unfortunate that we don't even really truly elect these people to make decisions on our behalf, monetarily. So Federal Reserve System itself has been designed as a crutch to support, our government, which has allowed us to borrow money, as you mentioned, up close to $20 trillion plus everything else, not including the national debt. But yet it's actually made it easier for us to become more of an entitlement-based society where now, we're dependent upon the government. Everything that most people do has some way or another is tied into receiving some type of aid from the government. So, the Federal Reserve has been a good crutch for us, and eventually that crutch is going to be pulled from underneath us. And then at that point, we'll see who will be there to back our government's, bad fiscal habits in the days ahead. So it's going to be interesting to see, that's for sure.
I've also heard basically if you use generally accepted accounting principles, the national debt would then also include all the unfunded liabilities, which is about $100 trillion. So what is your perspective on, it seems like, we hear this number $20 trillion all the time, but really the real national debt seems to be over $100 trillion.
Right. Good point there. Now, actually, as we're speaking right now, I'm actually looking at the U.S. debt clock. And so, when you scroll down to the very bottom, it says U.S. unfunded liabilities according to a GAAP accounting. And then it kind of lists what's actually included in this number of 105 trillion, actually, as of today, according to this website here. But it's Social Security, Medicare Parts A, B, and D, federal debt held by the public, federal employee and veteran benefits. So all those, once again, entitlements or promises to the public to pay them in the future based upon work, did at that particular time when it was initially promised, it's bound to fail for the simple fact that, if we are, spending, we're already living off more than we're able to ever, repay. What would make, someone, in rational mind think that our government, who's already heavily indebted, can actually live up to promises to pay, back, our national debt. Nevertheless, 105 and counting $trillion. And so the idea that, this goes back to the idea of the Federal Reserve being a crutch, the fact that they allowed the government to make promises that they knew eventually they couldn't, live up to. And that goes back to everything happened after the Great Depression with the Social Security, Reform Act, and then in the 60s with the Great Society and things like that. Those are all designed to pacify the current generation at that time, not really taking into account, down the line, someone has to actually pay for that. And as you can, and most people nowadays aren't really working the way they used to work. So it's not enough, money going into the system to actually cover these liabilities. So it's bound to say that, a lot of people pretty soon is going to come up on the short end of the stick. And at that point, it's going to really come back as a rude awakening that they were, for the most part, duped monetarily at the time by politicians, years ago that's no longer even in office. Or most people probably couldn't even, go back in time to actually think about the politician that came up with the bill to actually make that promise to them at that time. So it was all part of the whole, monetary matrix aspect, putting lids over their eyes just to keep them, quiet in the meantime, not really worry about the reality of it having to be paid off. So it was one of those things where, the government, in order to continue to, expand into our lives and everything we do, made some promises that's bound to fail. And just to even hint off that a little bit more, I was talking at an interview with Mr. Doug Casey a few interviews back on the Rethinking Dollar interview series, and he was mentioning how, he kind of feels bad for our generation, being that, his generation was, considered, a great prosperous time where, his family and his mom and dad, had a great, lifestyle at that particular time because they were a part of those promises. So they worked hard, they saved and all things like that. But he was saying that I feel bad for your generation, being that you guys are going to be the ones that have to foot the bill and you can't even foot the bill. And so when he said that, it got me to thinking about the idea that, we are susceptible to fall into those same traps of being, promised this and promised that, but yet, no one can actually live up to these promises. So that's something in and of itself to begin rethinking. The idea that, there's more promises given that can ever be lived up to. So, we're going to be in for a rude awakening, especially the millennial and centennial generation, which absolutely know nothing about, monetary, literacy and things like that. So unfunded liabilities will be a problem just because it's more that can ever be repaid, in my opinion.
So what does this look like going forward for the, the average person, or let's say the millennials? How will this actually impact them?
Well, I think it will impact a lot of us in different ways, but yet the younger generation, especially the centennials, those that are, born within the last, turn of this century, they're the ones that were going to feel the most pain, because by the time that they reach their 20s, 30s, they may actually be under a different monetary system in and of itself. And so to try to carry those same liabilities into what might be a new monetary system will absolutely cause hardship, because they won't be able to really trust politicians to be able to make promises that they will actually be able to even, really expect even in and of themselves. I'm sorry. And so in the days ahead, the whole paradigm in regards to our monetary system will begin to change, and actually has already shifted, because as I mentioned earlier, the world, other nations outside of the U.S. already know that, the monetary system has changed and shifted, and that, the Federal Reserve note, aka the dollar, is already expired. So future generations will feel the brunt of that, because they're going to be expected to try to pay some of this back, but won't even have a chance to pay so, because, they won't be making much money, to do so. So, taxation won't cover it. So, how will they be able to cover that? So it's going to be a rude awakening as far as the standard of living, cost of living for us all. So, I feel bad, mostly for us, the centennial generation, because they have no clue what's going on, and we're racking up debt on their head right now as we speak.
Now, besides just moving away, we've seen in the past century or so this move away from gold and silver as money, and now to have, paper as money. What about this new idea of moving to cashless society. Can you explain a little bit about this?
No problem. And so in order to really understand, I believe, the cashless society, as I call it, the cashless initiative, it's good to have a very long-term perspective of our monetary system. And so if we were to go back to, the kind of the beginning of this nation here in dealing with the coinage acts and things like that, it kind of made, coins, actual money of account and units of measurement of wealth, to having gone from that to the introduction or reintroduction of, paper currency or redeemable paper, when the whole Civil War happened and the whole greenback thing came into be, shortly after that, the idea of redeeming, paper for coins was kind of put back into place. And then, to rewind that into the 20th century, where the Federal Reserve came into play. And then they kind of introduced the Federal Reserve note, which was one of about 5 or 6 other different forms of money that was used at the time with, gold and silver. They had bank notes, they had, U.S. Treasury notes and things like that. So just to see the evolution of how we went from coins to redeemable paper to solely fiat paper. And then, once the gold standard and the Coinage Act of 1965 kind of ended the tie with gold and silver coins itself to solely a paperback, it kind of seems like the only thing next to try is to remove the paper even of itself. So to go from gold to paper backed by gold to nothing but paper, the next step, in my opinion, will only be naturally to go, digital, to where, right now most of our money is in the form of digits anyway when we use our credit card, debit card, things like that. And so the fact that you see other nations around us begin to attack cash and make cash seem like it's more of a terrorist, thing that's used to hide things and to evade taxation, things like that, which in small cases, I'm sure it is. But yet the idea of removing our personal property has already taken place when gold and silver coins were removed from our, our great-grandparents, and us giving bills of receipt in the form of paper. So the next obvious move is going to be to go digital, because that seems to be the trend with technology advance. And now we have all these different forms of paying, whether it be, the Apple Pay and the smartwatch pay, and so many different ways now of transacting, amongst one another in the form of just using smart technology. And so the fact that, the euro, 500 euro note a couple years ago was, removed. And then you have the Indian rupee just recently, they removed currency there. And then, former Secretary of Treasury here, Larry Summers, mentioned about removing the $100 bill from circulation. So just the mere fact they've done it in some countries and they've mentioned it here lets me know what ultimately the plan might be, which is to go digital. So it's only natural, and I think kind of like common sense, to think that, if the government continues to grow and to invade into our privacy as they have shown to have done throughout the years, it's only natural that they would want to remove physical cash, which is that last link to kind of just, knowing everything we do on a daily basis. So the cashless initiative will eventually come, especially as we get further into the year and years ahead, where the banking system, begins to have problems. And, if there's any chance of us, going below 0% interest rates, which we're currently at now, and banks actually starting to charge us, a good hefty amount of money to hold our accounts there, then it's going to be a real, cramp to crack down on cash, because everyone's going to go to cash. So at that point, we can kind of expect some type of law to say, hey, cash is no longer valid and we want it back, or something like that. So I think the cash initiative is going to happen. It's just a matter of when. And to take it even one step further, if you actually look at, the Federal Reserve note history itself, they actually started off with like a $10,000 bill. They had a $1,000 bill, $500 bill. So there's been large denominations of bills which have been removed from the Federal Reserve itself. And they've left us, down to the last, 5, which is the 100, the 50, 25, and some, the 2 and the 1. And so removing 100 and then possibly the 50, it wouldn't be far-fetched, in my opinion. I mean, they've took a good chunk of their own currency back, so it's possible it could happen. And one thing I like to say kind of jokingly is that if the Fed giveth, the Fed can taketh away. So, it's something I wouldn't put past them being able to do or wanting to do one of these days.
All right. And before we let you go, did you want to share with the viewers some insights about maybe how they can take action, I guess, in their own life, and maybe prepare for, further devaluation of the dollar and moving to a cashless society? How can people at least prevent themselves and maybe educate others about how to prepare for this so that they're not hurt as much?
Right. Good question. I believe that the best preparation ultimately will be to, be monetarily aware, to have, firsthand knowledge of our entire monetary system and how it relates to present events. to be able to, just not be so concerned with your current reality of, your daily life of, getting up, working, saving, things like that, but really looking beyond your own personal lifestyles and looking at others, looking at other countries. And like on my news program I cover world events because I believe that everything happening in Venezuela right now or in Zimbabwe or, anywhere else where they're struggling, I kind of consider those people, like my family. They're like my brothers and sisters. So I'm really concerned with learning about their struggles and seeing how they are, adapting to the harsh realities that they're living. And so I think, preparation starts with education. The more you know, the more you are empowered to take action within your own lives. And then once you begin taking, practical steps, whether it be just, receiving alternative, methods of storing wealth in the form of, gold, silver, cryptocurrency, things like that, extra can of food in your cupboard or bottled water and things like that. So just small things add up over time, but it starts with education. And so I want to actually hint at a book that I've read a long time ago, which kind of helped reshift my thinking and kind of gave me that different dollar paradigm perspective. It's a book called Paradigms by Joe Baker, and it's about being able to predict the future. And actually, the subtitle is The Business of Discovering the Future. And in his book, he talks about the paradigm and how paradigms shift, what a paradigm is, and really beginning to look at your entire world from a different perspective. And he used several examples about how, paradigms shift whenever problems are discovered. And right now our country, is facing a major problem, not only with this debt, but just the political structure of our country. So there's already, trends that are forming, which are presenting problems. And so the paradigm surrounding all of that has already shifted, as I hinted at earlier. Other nations around us already know that the United States of America is in turmoil. So it's just a matter of time before either we cause a complete meltdown of our own actions or something outside of us is done. And so education in regards to, thinking differently and renewing our minds in regards to what's going on around us, it will really play a big difference down the line outside of the physical things of, things I mentioned earlier as far as the natural preparation. So getting education will definitely go a long way, as well as watching shows such as yourself, and where you do a good job of educating and informing people, keeping people up to date. So things like that, alternative means outside of status quo will definitely help people go, down a long time. And then also for younger kids, I think, as I mentioned earlier, the centennials, they're the ones that are at the greatest risk of a complete, just a rude awakening because they're growing into a digital age where all they know is digital transactions. And so, I have children myself and just recently to try to reach out to those that don't have a chance to watch shows like this, or people who are not interested in things of this nature. I wanted to find a way to try to, get at them and to let them know that, you're working hard for something that technically doesn't even belong to you. So you are in need of a true monetary awakening. And so I kind of penned a couple of ideas in the form of what I consider dollarcation. And so actually I came together with all these different historical events and put it in an infographic, and I actually made it for my son, but yet I realized that majority of people, even adults, people that in my circle, don't really know these things. So it's something I kind of made available and just actually put on my website not long ago. But yeah, it's designed to be a starting step or a piece or a tool to help people begin asking questions. And the biggest question they probably going to be able to ask one of these days is, what is a dollar? So that's kind of my thoughts there. But other than that, education, I believe, is the first step, and then everything else will follow from there.
All right. Well, Mike, thank you so much for your time today. Before we let you go, did you want to share with the viewers any last thoughts you had and where they can find you online?
Yeah, sure, Elijah. I appreciate you taking time to sit down and speak with me. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. I thank you for the work you do. I've learned a lot from your videos throughout the years. And then if you want to find out more about the Rethinking a Dollar concept, you can just go to rethinkingsadollar.com. And, get a chance to actually take that money IQ test I mentioned earlier. And then from there, I wrote an ebook that is doing quite well. And then also the Dollarcation link. If you just hashtag Dollarcation into your social media site, something will pop up that'll take you towards this infographic I was talking about. But other than that, I do the YouTube channel as well, rethinkingsadollar.com. So other than that, that's where you can find me at. And just I share as much information as I can on this subject, which I believe is one of the most important subjects we, are facing right now. So that's Rethinking It Out.
Once again, thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure.
This video was brought to you in part by ReluctantPreppers.com. Click here to watch Reluctant Preppers' latest